How your childhood still controls you. The attachment theory: imagine you're walking through your life, thinking you're making your own decisions, choosing your partners, your friends, the way you react to stress, success, or failure. You tell yourself, I'm an adult now, I've grown past all that. But what if I told you you're not entirely in control? What if I told you that the way you reach for love, run from conflict, or obsess over validation isn't actually you, not the conscious, present-day you, but a child version of yourself playing out an old invisible script? That's the heart of attachment theory. And it's not just psychology, it's philosophy, it's your entire worldview. It's the lens through which you perceive reality. From the moment you were born, you began encoding emotional data. Not with words, but with sensations: who came when you cried, how they held you when they didn't, and what that absence meant. You recorded those moments in your nervous system like a kind of emotional DNA. And that's the terrifying, beautiful truth. We are all shaped by love, its presence or its absence. And that shaping doesn't stop when we turn 18. It follows us like a shadow. Attachment theory tells us that the way we bonded with our early caregivers, whether we felt secure, anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, becomes the template for how we seek connection for the rest of our lives. But here's where it gets philosophical. What is the self if the self is conditioned by forces we didn't choose? Are we truly free if our baseline for love and safety was written before we could speak? Let's go deeper. The child who felt seen and soothed learns, even before language, that the world is safe, that people can be trusted, that emotions can be held. That child becomes the adult who is open, connected, perhaps even resilient in the face of pain. But the child who is met with inconsistency, sometimes love, sometimes absence, learns something far more confusing. Love is unpredictable. That child becomes an adult who clings too tightly or pushes people away before they can leave.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
And the worst part? We don't see it. We call it just the way I am. We rationalize our reactions. I'm just not emotional, says the avoidant. I'm just very sensitive, says the anxious. I don't trust people easily, says the one who never learned how to. But what if those aren't personality traits? What if they're survival strategies from the sandbox? Think about your last fight with someone you love. Did you shut down, get defensive, spiral into panic, or try to control the outcome? That wasn't the adult you. That was your inner child grabbing the emotional steering wheel. And the tragedy is, we often punish ourselves for it. We say, I overreacted, I'm broken, I ruined everything. But maybe, just maybe, you were trying to survive in the only way you ever learned how. Here's the philosophical dilemma. If you're reacting from a wound, are you still free? Or are you just following a script you didn't write? And if so, who are you beneath that script? The Stoics believe that freedom lies in becoming aware of what controls us. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But how do you gain power over your mind when your mind is built upon emotional patterns you didn't consent to? Let me ask you this. When you crave someone's approval, is it really them you want? Or is their approval a symbolic echo of the caregiver who withheld praise until you performed perfectly? When you fear abandonment, is it your partner you fear losing, or the reactivation of a childhood terror that love disappears when you need it most? This is where the stakes get real. Because the way you attach in adulthood doesn't just affect your relationships, it affects your career, your sense of self-worth, your ability to take risks, your fear of failure. If your inner child learned that love was earned through excellence, you might become a perfectionist, addicted to achievement but terrified of rest. If you learned that emotions were dangerous, you might become hyper-independent, successful on the outside, but emotionally starving on the inside. And here's the kicker: these patterns are self-reinforcing. The anxious person clings, which pushes others away, reinforcing the belief that people always leave. The avoidant pulls back, which creates distance, confirming their belief that closeness leads to pain. It's a loop, a philosophical trap, a kind of emotional karma. So here's the first uncomfortable truth. You are not reacting to the present. You are reacting to the past disguised as the present. But here's the second, even deeper truth. Awareness is the beginning of freedom. When you start to see the pattern, you begin to separate yourself from it. You go from being a puppet of your past to the observer of it. And as every philosopher from Socrates to Buddha has said, awareness is liberation. So let me ask you something. When was the first time you felt like love was conditional? When was the first time you had to perform to be seen? When was the first time you were told in words or in silence that your emotions were too much? These aren't just memories. These are the building blocks of your current reality. And until we face them, we're not really living, we're reenacting. So how do we step out of the loop? That's what we'll explore next. The echo chamber of the soul, why you keep choosing the same people. Let's talk about the patterns. You know the ones I mean. The kind of relationships that feel eerily familiar, even when the faces change. The same arguments, the same emotional highs and lows, the same aching sense of being unseen, unheard, or misunderstood. It's like your soul is stuck on repeat, playing the same emotional song over and over. And no matter how hard you try to change your life, you end up dancing to the same rhythm. Why does this happen? Why do we keep choosing people who activate our deepest wounds, even when we consciously want the opposite? Here's the hard truth. We're not drawn to people because they're good for us, we're drawn to people who feel familiar. And familiarity, more often than not, is rooted in childhood. It's as if we're unconsciously trying to resolve an old emotional equation. If your mother was emotionally unavailable, part of you may seek out partners who are distant, cold, or inconsistent, not because you enjoy suffering, but because you're trying to win this time. You're trying to rewrite the ending. You think, if I can finally make this person love me, I'll undo the pain of the past. But that's not how healing works. That's how repetition works. That's the echo chamber of the soul. Every person we choose in adulthood is a mirror reflecting not just our desires, but our wounds. We're not falling in love with them, we're falling into a dynamic that feels like home. And if home was chaotic, emotionally unpredictable, or full of silent expectations, then we mistake that chaos for intimacy. It's not conscious. It's not evil. It's human. We are wired to seek familiarity because, to the brain, familiar equals safe even if familiar is painful. That's the paradox. That's the trap. So how do you break the cycle? Awareness is step one, but awareness alone is not enough. You have to sit with the discomfort of it. You have to ask yourself, what am I actually seeking in this person? Is it love or is it validation? Is it connection or is it the chance to finally fix what I couldn't fix as a child? And here's where the philosophical weight comes in. Can we ever truly love someone if we're only using them to repair a wound we refuse to look at directly? This is where attachment theory collides with existentialism. Sartre said, hell is other people, but maybe he meant that hell is the part of ourselves we project onto other people. We don't see them, we see our unmet needs, our unhealed pain, our ghosts. And this is why conflict in relationships often feels existential, like your very being is threatened. Because it is. Your concept of love, your sense of safety, those are not intellectual ideas. They are embodied assumptions, and when someone challenges them, they challenge your identity itself. Let me ask you, do you really know what healthy love feels like? Or does healthy feel boring? Does it feel flat, less intense, less magnetic? If so, it's not because healthy love is dull. It's because your nervous system is calibrated to equate anxiety with passion. That's what the echo chamber does, it distorts your emotional compass. So when someone treats you with consistency and kindness, you might actually feel repelled because it doesn't activate your attachment system. And without that activation, you don't feel in love. But what if that's not love? What if that's just your trauma looking for a partner? Think about that. What if the people you're most drawn to aren't the ones who will heal you, but the ones who will reenact your earliest wounds? What if your soul isn't seeking love, it's seeking familiarity, resolution, and redemption? Now, that doesn't mean we're doomed to repeat the past, but it does mean we have to become conscious of what we're repeating. You can't heal what you won't name, and you can't choose differently until you realize you're not actually choosing, you're reacting. You're reliving. So here's the next deep question. What would it mean to choose someone not because they feel familiar, but because they feel safe? What would it mean to redefine love not as intensity, but as presence? Not as drama, but as peace. That shift, that redefinition, is the beginning of healing. And it starts by acknowledging that the soul doesn't seek what's healthy, it seeks what it knows. And if we want to change our lives, we have to teach our souls a new language. The myth of independence, why I don't need anyone, is a lie. There's a story we love to tell ourselves, especially in a culture that worships self-reliance. I don't need anyone. We wear it like armor. We say it after heartbreak, after betrayal, after the 100th disappointment that taught us painfully that depending on others is a risk. So we become hyper-independent. We build lives that look strong, successful, unshakable. But beneath the surface, many of us are drowning in loneliness, starved for intimacy, and unable to admit it. Why? Because we've confused protection with strength. We've mistaken avoidance for empowerment, and we've bought into the myth that needing others makes us weak. But let me challenge that myth. Let's go deeper philosophically, emotionally, existentially. What does it mean to be human if not to be interdependent? From birth to death, we are relational beings. We are wired for connection. We do not just want others, we need them. Not in a desperate, helpless way, but in a fundamental spiritual, biological way. Our nervous systems regulate in the presence of another. Our brains develop in response to touch, gaze, attunement. Infants who are not held, not mirrored, not loved don't just become sad. They fail to thrive. They die. That's not poetry. That's neuroscience. So how did we get here, this place of isolation disguised as strength? We got here because of pain. Somewhere along the way, someone taught us that vulnerability equals danger. Maybe we reached out and no one came. Maybe we were punished for needing. Maybe our emotions were too big for the people around us, and so we learned to shrink, to silence, to detach. We learned to meet our own needs because no one else would. And that self-sufficiency became our safety. But here's the paradox. The very strategy that protected us has now become our prison. When you say, "I don't need anyone," what you're really saying is, "I've been hurt so deeply that I'd rather go without love than risk being abandoned again." It's not independence. It's fear. And fear, when unexamined, becomes identity. This brings us to the philosophical contradiction at the heart of the myth. The existentialists tell us that we are free, radically free, to choose our own meaning. But what happens when our choices are shaped by unresolved wounds? Are we really free if every no is just a disguised "please don't hurt me"? Hyper-independence is not just a personal issue, it's a cultural sickness. We glorify the lone wolf, the self-made individual, the emotionally detached genius. But in doing so, we forget that even wolves run in packs. We forget that no one is truly self-made. We all rise or fall on the invisible scaffolding of human relationship. And the longer we deny our need for others, the more we suffer in silence, pretending that solitude is serenity when it's really just survival. Let me ask you, do you pride yourself on not needing help? Do you feel anxious when someone gets too close, tries to care for you, sees through your armor? Do you interpret dependence as weakness and intimacy as a threat? If so, I want you to consider the possibility that your independence is not a sign of strength, but a scar. There is nothing noble about refusing to need. There is nothing wise about staying safe at the cost of connection. True strength is not the ability to stand alone. It is the courage to let yourself be seen, even when it terrifies you. It is the wisdom to know that love, in its healthiest form, does not enslave you, it frees you. It doesn't make you less of yourself, it reveals the parts of you that you buried to survive. So here's the deeper truth. You were never meant to do this alone. The child in you didn't just need food and shelter. They needed to be held, heard, understood. And that need didn't vanish when you turned 25 or got a job or bought a house. It's still there, quietly shaping your choices, whispering in your relationships, aching in your solitude. And here's the irony: when we finally admit our need for others, when we stop pretending we're invincible, we don't become weaker, we become more whole. Because it's in the act of reaching out, of being vulnerable, of allowing ourselves to need, that we begin to rewrite the story. We stop surviving and start living. Reparenting the self, the only way out is through. So now we arrive at the turning point, the place where awareness meets responsibility, where insight must become action. You've looked at the patterns. You've traced them back to your childhood. You've seen how your relationships reflect your earliest attachments. You've grasped that your independence may be a mask, your preferences may be protections, and your reactions may not be your fault, but now they are your responsibility. And that's where reparenting begins. Reparenting is not about blaming your parents. It's about becoming the parent you never had, the one who sees you, validates you, sets boundaries, and meets your needs without condition. It's about taking the raw material of your past and choosing to reshape it with tenderness. And it is, without question, one of the most difficult and courageous things a person can do, because it requires you to sit with the very pain you've spent your entire life avoiding. It requires you to feel what you couldn't feel as a child: grief, rage, terror, longing, and to hold those parts of yourself with compassion, not judgment. But here's the philosophical beauty of it. Reparenting is an act of existential rebellion. It says, I will not be defined by the scripts I inherited. I will not unconsciously reenact the suffering I did not choose. I will become the author of my own emotional life. That is freedom, not the absence of need, but the conscious tending to it. Not the denial of pain, but the willingness to heal it. Most people never get there. Most people live their whole lives inside the echo chambers of their childhood wounds, mistaking survival for identity. But you don't have to. You can pause. You can notice. You can listen to the voice in your head that says, you're too much, or you're not enough, or you don't deserve love unless you earn it. And instead of obeying it, you can ask, who told me that? Whose voice is that? And do I still want to carry it? This is where the ancient philosophical insight comes in: know thyself. Not just intellectually, but emotionally. Know the child within you. Know what they needed. Know how they adapted. Know how those adaptations became patterns, and how those patterns now shape your reality. And then, step by step, begin to offer that child what they never received: consistency, safety, permission to feel, permission to rest, permission to be. Let me ask you something. What would your life look like if you treated yourself the way you wish your caregivers had treated you? What if you spoke to yourself with kindness instead of criticism? What if you stopped abandoning yourself in the exact moments when you needed love the most? What if you became your own secure base, the place you never had? That is not selfish. That is sacred. Because once you begin to reparent yourself, your entire world changes. You stop chasing love that hurts. You stop avoiding love that heals. You stop performing for approval and start living from authenticity. You stop reacting from fear and start responding from presence. And here's the deeper truth. The healing of your attachment wounds is not just for you. It's for everyone you touch. It's for your future relationships. It's for your children, your friends, your community. Every time you choose to show up differently, to pause instead of panic, to stay instead of flee, to speak instead of silence, you interrupt the cycle. You become the ancestor someone else needed. You become the safe place that your younger self never found. So no, your childhood was not your fault. But your healing is your responsibility. And the only way out is through the pain, through the patterns, through the story. Not to erase it, but to redeem it. Because in the end, you are not broken. You are becoming. And every time you choose awareness over autopilot, compassion over criticism, connection over avoidance, you are reparenting your way back to wholeness. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most profound philosophical act of all.